our communities. I mean, for instance, in my studies, I know of Hispanic communities that have to pay rent to the white community in order to use their churches. I know of Catholic communities in the United States of America where the white community does not allow the Hispanic community to celebrate Mass in the main temple, and they have to rent a hall down the road or rent a Protestant church to celebrate the Catholic Mass. And this is the United States of America. So yeah, so we're wrestling with this. And I know of communities where a pastor has literally kicked out the community, the Hispanic community, because he didn't like the music, or because the community is not given enough resources to the basket. So yes, there's a political dynamic that is there, and frankly, I would love to see Catholic seminaries. I would love to see universities, as we prepare ministers at all levels to wrestle with these dynamics. Classism is another factor. You know, I mentioned in the talk that 55% of white Catholics has a college degree. There is a lot of education. Many white Catholics are highly positioned. Most bishops in the United States of America are white, you're American. Most theologians, Catholic theologians, more than 90% of Catholic theologians in this country are white, you're American. So when we find ourselves trying to hire a theologian, Latino, Latina theologian, many of these Latino theologians, Black theologians, Asian theologians have to go through an entire white system of dynamics and hiring processes. But that's the life, and it happens in universities, happens in Catholic schools, happens in dioceses, diocesan offices, name it, So the more we name these realities, and I actually thank you for the question, the more we name those isms, the more clear, or the clearer we come in our conversations, and we can actually have honest conversations as to why we're not progressing in that sense. Thank you.
I'm the Chief Diversity Officer here, and I just wanted to follow up on Wes's question because you did a great job addressing the issue of racism and classism, but I was fascinated by Wes's question about liberation theology, the expectation that this is what we talk about, yes, that these are inherent to my faith, my understanding of Catholicism. Can you?
Well, let me say something about liberation theology. We need to be careful about how we understand liberation theology in Latin America, because we may run the risk of assuming that the 300, 400 million Catholics in Latin America, they all are readers of Gustavo Gutierrez, Leonardo Boff, and John Sobrino, and that is not true, As a matter of fact, liberation theology in Latin America kind of grew up as a French movement within the Catholic Church and still remains as a French movement. It made some inroads through base communities, comunidades de base, and still has done that. But the backslash in Latin America since the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, for 4 decades, it was almost quenched, And liberation theology moved to universities in many ways. It went from these initial priests who were working in los barrios, in the communities, and went into universities, and that's where it still survives. And sometimes it trickles down, but most Catholic seminaries in Latin America would not have to do anything with liberation theology. In the United States of America, there is something similar. Most of the people who write about liberationist theological method and talk are housed in universities, are housed in Catholic universities. In most Catholic seminaries in this country, liberation theology may be seen as a method, as a movement, but never as the umbrella or the framework to reflect theologically. But you're absolutely right. Many people at the grassroots were informed by liberation theology because of the communities, because they were trained, because they read about it, and many of those people in Latin America have arrived in the United States with that knowledge. I mean, Selam for many years moved several elements of liberation theology, through practices of pastoral planning, for instance, through practices of evangelization and mission, and those informed many people, and they wouldn't call them liberation theology, but I mean, the fact that we openly talk about preferential option for the poor. That's kind of one of the contributions of liberation theology. Thank you.
I sense we could go on a long time here, but let's take one more question, maybe from one of the students over here. We have a number of students' hands up. And then we'll have time to speak informally.
Sure. Hello, thank you for coming here. My name is Reese Brosco. I'm a sophomore student here at Fordham, and I'm currently in the U.S. Latinx Spiritualities class. So I've been learning a lot about much of what you've discussed today, and my question was in regards to change in the church. So, like I said in my class, we've been learning a lot, as you echoed, about the power that young people are bringing, especially young Hispanics are bringing to Catholicism and their desire to be involved. And I attended the Ignatian Family Teaching for Justice this year, and I went to it and felt the energy there and saw so many young Catholics from various Jesuit institutions all around the country. And there was this really great energy that we wanted change, we wanted reform, and we wanted these things to happen. And I went to a talk given by Father James Martin about the relationship between the church and the LGBTQ plus community, and I was honestly a little disappointed. Young people want to be included, but it feels like for a lot of young people, at least from what I can see and from my own experience, that a lot of these people, because of their identity, are not being allowed to participate. So my question to you is there a plan? Do you know of a plan? Like, how can these people be included who are not included currently because of their identity and how they identify themselves?
No, there is not a master plan. So I wish I could say we have a plan. What we have is what I'm seeing at least at the ministerial level. What I see is we are in the context of Hispanic ministry in the 1960s and 70s. Many priests and many sisters, many lay leaders did Hispanic ministry as community organizing. That stopped in the 80s, 90s, and semi-stopped. I mean, a few people kept doing it. Right now, I'm seeing a resurgence of that approach to ministry in the Latino community. So my advice is always, and again, I have been involved in ministry since I was 7 years old, So I was I worked in my parish, and I was involved in everything, and I even to this day, I haven't stopped. Something that I have learned over the years is change rarely comes from the master plan that someone writes from above, We need to work with those who are above, We need to work with our priests and our sisters and our bishops and theologians and so forth. But the best change is going to come from how 5 of you, 10 of you sit together and imagine a new way of being Catholic, and then the fire that you have becomes contagious, that others will want to do the same. That's how we need to start changing. That's the fire of evangelization. And the best example for me has always been Jesus, He began with 12 people, 12 renegades, if you want to call them. And these people were so on fire and in love for one particular cause that every time one of them spoke, 5,000 wanted to follow. How many times have you spoken and 5,000 people wanna follow what you have to say? Maybe we need more passion, but I think it's get together, because it changes most of the time begin at the grassroots. The master plan is the gospel. The gospel. I was recently at an interview, and somebody asked me, what would you recommend the Catholic Church to or pastoral leaders to read for transformation and change? And my answer was, it sounds like a pious response, but to be honest with you, it's the most powerful response. Let's read the Gospels. Sit down, read the Gospels as a community, and let the Holy Spirit move our hearts. Actually, I ended up preaching at the end of it.
This is a good time to stop. I want to thank you again, Professor Ospino, for incredibly rich and multifaceted challenges and information and reflection points that I think many of us will be talking about for a long time. I'd also like to thank those who made this possible, Maria Terzulli, our wonderful administrator, Associate Director Angela O'Donnell, and everyone who's working with the Curran Center. And lastly, to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to be here to really let yourself be what we're supposed to be at a university, right? A place where we really get enriched, not just in the classroom, but by gathering to really think together about important things. Thanks for coming. Have some cookies and some soda and some stuff. Professor Ospino is going to be here for a few minutes. If you'd like to come up and ask your question, I know some of you had questions. Please come up. Thank you very much for being here.